Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to this launch event for 3 new Bloodaxe books. Tonight we're going to hear from Rebecca Perry and Chrissy Williams, whose new collections are both published next week. And we're also going to hear from Deborah Landau, whose 4th collection was published by Bloodaxe last year during the height of the pandemic, at a time when we weren't able to give it the kind of exposure it deserves. So tonight we have Rebecca Perry is going to be reading from her 2nd collection, Stone Fruit, which is a Poetry Book Society recommendation. And Chrissy Williams is going to be reading from her 2nd collection, Low. And the 3rd reader is Deborah Landau, reading from her what is her 4th collection, Soft Targets, but it's her 1st collection to be published in the UK. Rebecca and Chrissy are both in London, and Deborah is in Manhattan. Deborah teaches at New York University. She runs the creative writing program there. Rebecca and Chrissy are both freelance writers. So without any further ado, I'd like you to welcome Rebecca Perry, who will read for about 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll have Chrissy Williams, then we will have Deborah Landau, and then we'll come back again and have the same sequence of poets reading again. And after that, we'll come together for a discussion. So please, would you welcome Rebecca Perry.
Thanks, Neil. Hello, everyone. It's very weird to say that when you can't see anyone, but hello anyway, and thank you for coming to hear us read this evening and afternoon for Deborah. And if you're watching on YouTube afterwards, then thanks for doing that as well. I'm reading from Stone Fruit, which is my 2nd book, as Neil said. I wanted to start with, there are the book's in 3 sections, and I wanted to read 2 poems from the middle section of the book. They are long-ish prose poems, but not too long. It's always worth saying. So the first one I wanted to read is called No Rabbit, which is kind of a response to a poem from my first book, which was called Ganoush. So it's kind of a revision and a bit of a delving into the first person and the limitations of it, and what can be done with it, I suppose. So this is No Rabbit. I once wrote a poem which appeared to mourn the death of a pet. After reading it, a friend asked about the pet, which he presumed to be a dog. I told him that the dog was a figment of my imagination, as was its death and the scenario in which I imagined its memorial, the person I was with in the poem, the cold evening, and the frost that formed on the grass. The friend, a poet, seemed annoyed and disappointed. He had wanted to be in on the trick, even if he couldn't be sure what would be pulled from the hat. Lying comes with many responsibilities, or as many as we choose to acknowledge, perhaps none, or it needn't be called lying at all. The 2 scenes I described in the poem were not retellings, but I have, in other streams of time, known the deaths of animals and humans and dark nights and frost on the grass, and being in the quiet company of another person in the aftermath of grief, as has practically everyone else. The poem, in part, had been about how we manage death in ritual or through contact with the living, or how we fail to manage it at all. The poem had also mentioned a person I love, though not in the context of my love for them. I suppose this had been for my benefit alone, a private word with myself. Perhaps that was the real travesty of the poem. I have an absurd sense that love poems without pain in them are shameless, and that anecdotal honesty is as much a figment of the imagination as hallucinating rain through a dusty window. Years after I wrote about the fictional dog, I sat on the shore of a beach very far from home, surrounded by small translucent crabs popping out of their holes, as that same person, the one I loved, walk with their back to me through the waves to swim in a rough sea. In those moments, the sun was setting brilliant silver on the surface of the water. I was thinking then that I was afraid of so much and them so little. Months passed and this was shown to be false. More time went by, the friend died, the poet, and along with it his side of the story, the knots in the grain. Memory continues to mix sediment into the water. Familiar smells disturb the air. Light glows in from the hallway. If you fail to close the door on a poem, how can it sleep? Anyone could look in. And the second poem is also not so much a response to a poem in my first book, but kind of a companion piece, I suppose. So I wrote a duologue in my first book called The Execution of Lady Jane Grey, which was a conversation piece between Lady Jane Grey and the executioner. And I've done a similar thing, and I honestly hadn't even realised that I was doing another poem on the same topic until it had happened, and it was almost kind of typeset. And then I was like, I've done this before, but differently, which I guess is amazing what the brain does. But this is different. It's looking at it through the eyes of the Paul Delaroche painting on the topic. So yeah, this is a response piece as well, I suppose. It's called The Execution Was Conducted in the Open Air. I walked to the park after the blizzard. The air had the muffled quality that follows snowfall. No distinction could be made between the white slopes of the park and the bright grey sky. The ducks in the pond tipped back and forth. Their feet were orange. The water below the ice, a very dark navy. The swans slapped along the shelf of ice that covered about half of the water. Snow in the foreground of your vision takes on a bluish hue. In the middle ground, it takes on a hint of purple. To paint the white of snow is only to capture the light that falls on it, as with all things. The closest anyone has come to painting the colour white is Paul Delaroche in The Execution of Lady Jane Grey, in which her dress is of such brilliance that the paint seems somehow alive. The dress appears to glow very white, though it is in fact nearer to a yellow white or cream. The painting viewed in the flesh is astonishingly large and imposing. In the middle of the dim room, Jane seems to hover, a bright slipping moon. The most powerful single point in this painting is the space between Jane's left forearm, which hovers above the block, and the palm of the man, Sir John Bridges, Lieutenant of the Tower, who guides her to it. His thumb and fingertips touch her skin, but there is no contact with the palm. That small space, that rounded slice of shadow, is a pure and perfect manifestation of care and tenderness and of men who stand by and do not help. The true, most powerful point in the painting is the space between the mouth of the grieving lady in waiting, who we know only by her back, and the surface of the column she presumably wails at. Wailing may be presumed because her arms are raised above her head and her legs seem to buckle. This point of space is a private one, and therefore to be imagined and not described.
Thank you, Rebecca. We're now going to hear from Chrissy Williams, reading from her second collection, Low.
Thank you, Neil. And yeah, it's really nice to be here in my own Zoom, in my own room. It's as Rebecca said, it's surreal, but I know that you're there. This is Low, with this lovely cover art by Tom Humberstone. Goes all the way around. I have been trying to figure out what to read for you, because the book sort of pivots around the second section of poems, which are about miscarriage. But just to read from that section feels somehow too abrupt or too inappropriate if you can't see what's kind of come before and after it, because everyone approaches collections differently, but I really feel that the poems in Low are best read through sort of from beginning to end. There's a real through line, or at least there's an attempt at a through line. I have a whole issue with narrative, which we'll get to later. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to read some poems just from the very first section now in this first half to sort of introduce the idea of the book to you. I think what the book as a whole is doing is trying to explore the impact that miscarriage has on identity. And in doing that, there's lots of poems in here about identity and trying to figure out what the things are, what the tent poles are that we peg in to try and create our identities. Okay, I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, which acts as a sort of introduction. It kind of sets up this theme that goes through the whole book, I think, of failure, but you'll see that I'm not always approaching it in a way that that you might be expecting from what I've just said. Do I need to tell anyone what RuPaul's Drag Race is, first of all? Because there's a couple of poems I'm going to read that refer to that. I'm going to assume no, because it's a reality show that's taking over the world. But Google it if you don't know, and you will not be disappointed, trust me. Okay. On lip syncing for your life. If I really had to lip sync for my death, I would be screaming every word. Just think, your final song, and you don't get to choose it for yourself. Someone else critiques, someone else's audience from hell. And if they give you something difficult, the world might fall away just because you never learned to be fierce, to fake it till you make it. Maybe that's where I've gone wrong, not pretending hard enough, performing who I want to be. Oblivion. Don't think oblivion for faltering to Kesha. Think oblivion for botched death drops from 10,000 feet. Fail big. Don't fail at home. Fail as publicly as possible. Pose for your final selfie. Imagine dancing to a funeral march, the Lord's Prayer, your family's favorite hymns. You know, I stopped mouthing words in church years ago. The next poem I am going to read is about the obscenity of having to watch adverts whenever you're watching anything on television, which admittedly I'm doing less and less these days anyway. But it's also about the bombardment of expectations that advertisers put on us every day. And it's probably also slightly about being a daughter. It's called Tangled, after the Disney film Tangled, which is the Disney Rapunzel film. Tangled. Mother knows best. Listen to your mother. It's a scary world out there. The Eurotunnel, the shuttle, is the fastest route to France by car. An adventure is only 35 minutes away. I thought I was doing a good job with my normal toothbrush, but my dentist said no. He told me I should go pro with Oral-B. Jude Law hands me some car keys in Cannes, the all-new Lexus RX, amazing in motion. I want skincare that defies aging without spending ages searching. Olay Total Effects, your best, beautiful. Okay, Google, what's the quickest way home by bike? You have reached your destination. Walt Disney World Resort, Florida, a land of never-ending wonder where dreams come true, and that's just the beginning. For the first time in forever, I'm completely free. I am a horrible daughter. I am never going back. This poem is about maybe another stereotypically female experience, or certainly in my experience of over apologizing. Yeah, the poem is called Poem Equals Sorry. I apologize. Pull out a sigh. Nod. Make my face a gracious lie. Be nice in the moment, a Cheshire smile, or else fill yourself with bees. Set it on fire. Sort of an anti-apology poem. And then the last poem I'll read from this section is Back to Drag Queens. This is a poem about transgression and the joy of transgression, and specifically the joy I take in a drag queen called Katia, who loves the Jodie Foster film Contact, which I have to mention because it pops up. But yes, this is transgression, really. Katia. I want to be friends with Katia. I want to dress how I want to dress, like a gale, full of glitter and back alleys, a seagull laugh to shake our being, whose secret lies, perhaps, in kicking legs upwards in delight, painted, an omnivorous harpy, goofy, loving our friends, lighting up around them. What a man, unstoppable, they'll say. Why, they're the perfect woman. Now that's me. Judy Jetson, enraged with a penis and obsessed with contact too, in every situation. A little Jodie Foster, oh dear role model for my role model. Find meaning, play parts, everything real happens behind the eyes. All those things we cannot prove, like love, like the world is just what we make of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy. We'll now move from one kind of bombardment to another kind of bombardment with Deborah Landau, whose book is called Soft Targets, because we are all soft targets in this modern world. Deborah is in Manhattan, and it's afternoon there, and it's 90 degrees heat, and her aircon isn't working. Deborah.
Thank you, Neil, and thanks to Bloodaxe, and such a pleasure to read with Chrissy and Rebecca. And thanks so much to all of you for listening. I can't wait until we can all be in rooms together again. So I've always written about the body, and in this new book, Soft Targets, the fear of annihilation goes beyond the self to, as Neil said, an imperiled planet on which we're all soft targets. And there are so many threats. The book is constructed in linked lyric sequences, so it's pretty much one long poem, and the individual poems are, separated. They don't have titles, and I'll just pause between reading them. And I'll read the opening sequence of the book. When it comes to this fleshed neck, even a finger could do it. Even a sharp stick, a blunt blow, a fall. My jugular, there's a soft target. And night's a soft target, all of us within it. Osama shot dead in his pajamas, and everyone on the Brooklyn-bound F as a man removes a bomb from his bag, a square of chocolate he detonates in his mouth. There were real officers in the streets, but they were doing it wrong. One winked at me, another was purely conceptual. One thought to himself as I walked by, you little bitch. Bulge knobs of their guns made them oral, made them real big machismo, even the skinny ones, even the abstract. A certain beauty in the duty of it. Meanwhile, he was broken, she was concussed, and we returned home gilded with what? Safety. In advance of danger, animals agitate. When the time comes, all this will be only shouts and disturbance. A breath leaves the body and wishes it could return, maybe. The news, rich with failure, dither, terror, the bloated moon in constant charge of us as vapor. And this did frame our constituency, even in our cozy homes, even in a painless state on the downriver. Oh, oblivion, sipping champagne as another night brings forth, dancing its big plan, its damage. I had a thought, but it turned autumn, turned cold. I had a body, unwearied, vital, despite the funeral in everything. Ample with bodies, covered in graves and gardens, potholes and water, an ardent river we walked together, a wine and rising breeze. Much trouble at hand, yet the lilies still. Massive powers that be, what will be? We smoke our pipes to forget you. And mildly now we bide our time, the violence and real cities under siege, but also filled this morning with coffee drinkers, office workers, taxi drivers, boys on bikes. Again, we came to rest on the riverbanks, finding a floodlight flooding what we'd come to see. How is it to have a body today, to walk in this city, to run? To be strong and whole in daylight is to be tapped perhaps for a blade, yet off into the air we're sent in flesh, and kismet it is if we're in the right or wrong or right, school, office, market, concert, cafe. Red velvet cells, the elemental oxygen and pall of eyelids, fists, feet. Vivid apparitions of those who've jumped or fallen in the jingle of no spring. Existence is killing us. I don't want to see what can't be unseen. Nights we play the game of going to sleep, expecting to wake up. It was good getting drunk in the undulant city, whiskey lopping off the day's fear. Dawn came with an element of Xanax. Dusk came, I dumbed myself down. Where there were brides, grooms, these bored boy soldiers with iPhones and guns. I'm a soft target, you're a soft target, and the city has 100,000 softs. The pervious skin, the softness of the face, the wrist inners, the hips, the lips, the tongue, the global body, its infinite, permutable softnesses. Soft targets, soft readers, drinkers, pedestrians in rain. In the failing light we walked out, and now we share a room with it. Would you like to read to me in the soft? Would you like to enter me in the soft? Would you like a lunch of me in the soft, in its long delirium? The good news is we have each other. The bad news is Kalashnikov assault rifles, submachine guns, pistols, ammunition, 4 boxes packed with small steel balls. Oh, you who want to slaughter us will be dead soon enough. What's the rush? And this our only world. As you can see, it has a problem. As you can see, the citizens are hanging heavy. The citizens' minds are out. Eros, Eros. In Paris, we stayed all night in a seraphic cocktail haze, despite the blacked out theater, the shuttered panes. Tonight, we're the most tender of soft targets, pulpy with alcohol and all a sloth. Monsieur, can we get a few more? There are unmistakable signs of trouble, but we have days and days still. Let's be giddy, maybe. Time lights a little fire. We're animal hungry, down to our intricate bones. Oh, beautiful habits of living. Let me dwell on you a while. Thank you. Up there.
Thank you very much for that powerful reading, Deborah. Before we go on to the next set of readings again, I'd just like to say, if anyone watching has any questions or comments they'd like to make, do put them into the chat and they'll be relayed to me at the end when we have the discussion. And so now we're going to have Rebecca Perry reading the second set from Stonefruit.
Thanks, Neil. And thanks, Chrissy and Deborah. It's so lovely to hear you read from your amazing books and to read alongside you. I'm going to, in this second set, read from the long poem that ends the book, which is called On Trampolining, which predictably is about trampolining, which I was involved in as a competitor from the age of about 3 until about 15. So it's a very long poem, about 25 pages, I think, which is arguably too long a poem, but I've broken it into sections. So it's a poem of 9 parts, and yeah, it's about trampolining and competition and perfection, and it's an elegy as well for a family friend. Yeah, and other things as well, I think. So I'm going to start from the beginning and read the first section, which is called Monograph of the Cross, and then I'll read a little bit from the 5th section, I think. So this is On Trampolining. 1, the Monograph of the Cross. When I was a trampolinist, I never felt like my movements were really taken on by my body. It was more like my mind forced the movements into being, rather than them just happening in a way that felt instinctive or magical or inevitable. I still imagine that a really gifted athlete becomes their movements, as if the muscles absorb them, no divisions or edges, the brain an ice cube melting into the body. The brain is like a horse. You love the horse. The horse's nose is so soft, but it will throw you off into a shallow stream and make you eat mud. A gifted athlete is able to tame their brain in such a way that their thoughts become like water, by which I mean blood, running into every corner, but still under command. My mind would throw me backwards instead of forwards, trick me to land on my neck. I was not a gifted athlete. I knew it. My heel failed first. I was around 7 years into my training. A chiropractor treated my spine by twisting my hip towards him and pushing my shoulder towards the wall. He treated my ankles and shoulders. He didn't explain the relevance of Achilles to my inflamed Achilles tendon, which I would later consider a missed opportunity. Why didn't he speak over the crunch of my bones? Perhaps he enjoyed playing the instrument of the human form. That little room of discomfort, the high table with the paper cover, the clock, the desk, the bone crack. He asked to treat my neck. Problems passed from top to bottom. I said no. I had cricked my neck the year before and couldn't walk for days. My brother did the same and his lips turned blue. At the next appointment, my heel was worse. The chiropractor said he had warned me this would happen. A few years later, a sharp pain shot up my lower back when my feet hit the trampoline. Once it arrived, it stayed. Falling into pain is a strange feeling. Jumping away from it, knowing it is coming again very soon, choosing the pain, being helpless to stop it. I started wearing a back support. It was beige, secondhand, and wrapped around my torso with parallel Velcro strips. It worked basically like a corset, squeezing the pain. Between routines, a fellow trampolinist or a coach would rewrap me. Nearer the end of my career, I was told, minutes before I was due to perform a synchronized routine, that I couldn't compete with such a visible injury. The man who made this decision and delivered the news routinely marked me lower at competitions than the other judges. My mum had decided long ago that he had something against me. The support wouldn't fit under my leotard. I unwrapped myself and fell into the inevitable, open and searing. When I was around 6, training on a Friday night, an older girl landed on the trampoline in the sitting position with her legs slightly bent. The impact smashed her face into her knees like a coconut on a countertop. When I went to the toilet, she was being held at one elbow by my mum and at the other by my mum's friend, my coach's wife, Dee. The girl was facing the mirror, her whole face red with blood and her teeth bright white, framed by the blood she was spitting out and losing down her chin into the sink. Her crying echoed in a flat way, the toilets being in the basement and windowless. Her face was reflected in the mirrors in front of her and on either side, a multiplicity of red monsters. Her eyes flicked to meet mine in the mirror when I entered. My mum told me kindly to leave. The girl had her cheek reconstructed with a metal plate. What is the role of pain in the process of learning? 5. Glossary of competitive anxiety terms. State anxiety. As small children, having stayed at my grandparents' flat, my brother and I woke to discover that an infection had glued his eyes shut during the night. The skin of his eyelids stretched with the effort to open them, my baby mole brother trying to come into the light. He was very calm. I soaked some tissue in milk and dabbed it on his eyes. Slowly, small gaps appeared beneath his eyelashes as the lids became unstuck. Trait anxiety. I was afraid of one of my coaches. When I was told she wasn't due at a session, I didn't believe it and looked at the door of the sports hall constantly throughout the session, waiting for her to manifest like a ghost at the strike of midnight. Threat. As a child, I had a large yellow book of stories, which for a while I read nightly. One story, whose exact beginning escapes me, ended with a beast and a young girl walking for miles through the wilderness. The beast, to make the way safe for them, goes ahead to vanquish an enemy in a duel. The young girl is instructed to wait for him on a fallen tree trunk. She is not to move in any way, nor even to blink until he returns to her. He leaves and she obeys. Days pass, the beast wins his victory and the sky flashes red. In excitement, knowing what this means without even feeling it, her foot twitches barely at all. That very second, the girl turns to stone, as well as the beast far away and all the land between them, the tree she sits on and the grass where her feet rest, every blade. The trees and the fruit that hang from them, fruit that was ripe and ready to be taken, which she had resisted despite the heat and the thirst and the days of waiting, all now irreversibly set in place, sucked of colour, never to feed insect, bird, or passerby. She had failed in so inconceivably small a way. She had failed utterly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And now, after all that pain, I think we're probably going to get a bit more of it from Chrissy, from Low. So, Chrissy Williams.
Sorry about the pain. Oh my goodness. I just wanted to say, Rebecca, there is absolutely no way that poem is too long. That is just a wonderful poem, that Trampolining poem. It's really great to hear you read from it, and Deborah as well. Yeah, it's really great. So, okay, this section that I'm going to read through is the penultimate section in the book. So, as you can imagine, other poems have happened in the meantime. This section's all set in LA pretty much, and being a foreigner who's only been to LA once, LA occupies in my mind still very much this space of movie magic, movie history, comedy history, Disneyland, the Magic Kingdom, like in the other poem I read, the place where dreams come true, and of course the sort of the dark opposite to all those things. And for me, there's something about movies, and there's something about our compulsion for narrative, for wanting to impose narrative on situations to try and make sense of them. So yeah, I've imposed this sort of through line on the book, this idea that you should read it from beginning to end, and it's another, I think, sort of desperate attempt to be able to make some sense of the experiences. Perhaps I should say before I start reading that I've been studying improvisation and clowning a lot, and I'm really interested in absurdity, because I feel that so much of what we go through, even the very worst things, are so often tinged with the absurd. I mean, the absurd can be seen to a point where it stops being funny even. Sorry, Neil, maybe it is going to be pain, but yes. Okay, I will read through this section, and you'll see it has its own sort of pattern to it. LA story. A hot dog flies over the hills of Hollywood, an endless gesture, a tired clown. Let your mind go, and your body will follow. Learn to laugh. Learn to be happy. Learn how to predict the weather. Improv. What isn't said isn't known. No one can read between the lines when there are none. You don't need to be obvious, just be clear. Remember, you are always communicating. Magic Kingdom. The business of mice is serious. Not everybody wears pants. Barf up your pain, a pineapple. Wear the ears. Laugh. Improv. So much communication is physical. Learn to read other people's signals. Do not fear your partner's eye contact. Even silence can be listened to. Moon illusion. Unruly city. Great lit face low behind tall palms. Flamingo taco trucks. Death perches on my shoulder. Small feathers, a smile beaked in black. I know now, as she nods to me, There is nothing left to worry about. Improv. Look out for shiny things that are unusual. Be specific. See what works and follow it into a pattern. Rest the game so it has more impact when you play it. The cardinal sin is being boring. At Griffith Observatory. There are two epigraphs at the start of this. One is from Griffith J. Griffith, who is, unsurprisingly, the man behind making the Griffith Observatory in the first place. If all mankind could look through that telescope, it would change the world. The other one is from James Dean at the Griffith Observatory in Rebel Without a Cause. Hey, it's all over. The world ended. I look into the night sky and see a star increasingly bright. I would like some dirt, please. Do you have some dirt? If I stand in the place where stories happen, I become part of the fiction, my body photographed from all angles, our faces interchangeable. Please now, bring me some dirt. As the star approaches, the weather will change. The great polar fields will rot. The seas will warm. The great people of the world will look on. Please, bring me some dirt now. Bring me some dirt. We will disappear into blackness. Even you will disappear. We will disappear into the space from which we came, destroyed as we began in a burst of gas and fire. Dirt now. I want some dirt. In all the immaturity of our universe, the earth will not be missed. Just one story in a billion with an ending. Improv. Commit to your character. Make bold choices. Don't be scared of big emotions. This isn't a normal day. This is the day something finally happens. Sunset and La Brea. Driving on, Jerry told me the Chaplin studios off Sunset and La Brea were taken over by Henson, who superimposed a Kermit head where Charlie Chaplin's used to be, which I took to mean that everything is ephemeral, including our systems for attributing worth, meaning, and reputation. You know, LA was a desert once. The Grand Canyon wasn't always a canyon. And what happens when you turn the sprinklers off, turn the sprinklers on? And I watched that video about being turned into a tree after you die, no matter what happened in your personal life. Though they say cremation is more practical, but what is practical, really? And I wonder at what point in human history the dead started to outnumber the living. Pretty quickly, I guess, what with survival of the fittest. Still, I like being alive in a time of Muppets, as the world goes on changing. And who wouldn't want to fall in love with everything, to reach a hand out the window as it all breezes past? Improv. Accept mistakes as gifts. Don't ignore them. You don't need to force them. You don't need to be afraid of them. You can choose how much of yourself to reveal. You can choose whether to use your losses. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chrissy. So we will now move on from one kind of compelling narrative to a completely other kind, with Deborah reading again from Soft Targets.
Thank you, Neil. So I'm going to flip forward in the book and read toward the end a sequence about the birth of my daughter that contends with the question of how to protect the cherished little world of family, friends, children, beloveds, when the external world seems so increasingly menacing. Into the sheets we slipped, a crisis affixing us to each other again and again. Womb was I, turned out. The babies were a transcript of our making, a panorama of life on its back. Thrice I plunked out the humans until we'd had enough of such extravagant weather and lay there thinking of the bed, how much of life happens there. At the center of everything, the piquant, transitory joy. And from this, even the charred wrecks, even the Dahmers, Nazis, Bin Ladens, all fleshed out of wild, unimaginable, fleshed out of wild, unmanageable eros. We're always a bit dirty with it. In the birth room, you couldn't think. You were a single moan and tingle. You were in agony maybe, but also had wings like never before. Welcome to the love bazaar. Let's dip back into it again, virility. Pheromonal lure of silk slipping off skin. Excessive again, his kiss, her shudder, as snow petals down a lace of white flowers and our baby sleeps in her indigo crib. Such a reckless act to pop out a human with the jaws of the world set to kill. And she arrived before dawn, staring straight. Her job to eat what exists. Any caress is precious, exaltation in the breathing room, a life force. Who knew our brushstrokes had been so precise, greening darkness with this young vine, and this new pain to slow time. Drew more and more from the nub of her until she was herself, emerged ready to live her one life. And she seemed friendly, looking sideways as I swiped her clean. Honey, here are your limbs. We are not too late. Daughter is a soft target. In a fuchsia crush she's come, bare and guileless, fair and free, funneling forward without a helmet toward the barest, sickest tree. Keep them from being head kicked in. Keep their blood inside, intact. Keep them from shooting sprees, from x-rays and MRSA, spiked metal, sadistic men. Take a self and put her out in the wood for the struggle. Invest in armature. So I told the sky it should stay blue, told my daughter she should stay breathing, told my love he should and we would, as the monster storms showed their teeth and the fires flared and the wines weren't plum enough to numb us and our leaders' virulent egos seethed, people dying off as if it were nothing to leave this planet, as if it were a breeze. Don't blame the wisteria for setting off a feeling like freedom, a feeling like joy. We watched the people walking in the open square. One of them was a specialist in killing. Fear was the way of others. I've seen the most extraordinary thing about people, their faces. Remember the trees in springtime? We ate candy beneath them. Shouts from the playground. Static of yellow jackets, your fresh new haircut. Here's a tweeted canto, some words for the end of the world, for when I'm forever nothing, and you are, and you, and you. What we were for such a brief. And with the laundry, the dog at his bowl, the boys going at it out back. Oh, you who want to slaughter us, we'll be dead soon enough, what's the rush? And this our only world. Now, bring me a souvenir from the desecrated city. Something tender, something that might bloom. And I'll stop there.
Right, thank you very much, Deborah, This, the Only World. We're going to talk about that in a minute, I think. So we're going to move into a discussion room at the moment. As I said earlier, if you have any questions or comments, do feed them through on the YouTube chat. And if you're very excited, as I hope you all are, by the books, just scroll down on the YouTube page and you'll see links to buy them all. All the books are available from the Bloodaxe website, and Rebecca's and Chrissy books won't be available until the end of May from Amazon, but you can get them now from Bloodaxe, as you can also get Deborah's book. So I'm just waiting for us to be moved through into the room. Do stay there, and very shortly we will all be together. Right, I think we're all now together. So it struck me, listening to your poems and obviously having read the books and knowing them really well, that one thing that all your books have in common is their exploration of vulnerability and fallibility in different ways. I'm wondering whether any of you would like to come in on that.
Start. Vulnerability, yes, for sure. I started writing this book when NYU, I direct a program at NYU in Paris, and we were there during the string of terror attacks in 2015 and 2016. And after a while, I was just walking around thinking, I'm a soft target, and you are, and you are, and you are. And the poems came from that. And then, of course, in the years since, there's been escalating violence of all kinds, as there often is on our planet. So vulnerability, yes.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Neil, because I was, as I was reading Chrissy and Deborah's books, I was making little notes to myself in my notebook, and the last note I made before we came on this call was resistance and vulnerability. So I felt very much that, exactly like you say, that vulnerability, that fragility, fallibility, and all of that, but very much reading the other two books, it felt very like there was a really strong sense of resistance as well. And I think in both of your endings as well, I wrote them down because they seem to mirror each other so well. It was Chrissy, you said, like, pull my hand back up, glistening, wet, new, and Deborah's end, something that might bloom, like very much within this kind of mess or feeling of terror or whatever it is, there's still this sense of hope at the end, which I guess took the edge off of the vulnerability for me in some ways. I don't know if that seems right.
And
Yeah.
Chrissy, you have that wonderful, the play and humor in your poems, which balances out that vulnerability, which I would like to have more of in my work. I really admire that.
There is so much. I'll come back. No, I just want to reply to what you said. There is so much humor, though, that I think both of you are really good at landing just these really unexpected lines. Like, Deborah, there's one of yours that starts at the one about the what's I don't understand what's so neo about the neo-Nazis. They seem just like the old, like, that's incredible. And Rebecca, I think I spat out my tea when in the middle of one of your poems, and I'm in the poem, and there's suddenly this line, I threw the cat, because there's a cat who's come and latched onto you. Like, you're both really good at being able to do that as well. And I think it's part of it, isn't there, that we don't want to be, there's something about being only vulnerable that means that you're somehow to be looked at in a different way, or there's something about being able to put in these other elements that says, no, there is more to this. This isn't just like a spectacle to be looked at.
Right, and I so admire the poem you started with, Rebecca, No Rabbit, and I wonder if, like, the idea of lying as some kind of armor or defiance against that vulnerability, that, you know, you can't really see what's there. There's artistry, there's craft, there's some kind of a filter that you've put in place.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think with poetry, I guess, no matter how vulnerable something could seem, always the person who wrote it, and you've always chosen what you've given away or not, and you've used whatever you've used, humor or something oblique or something, you know, there are, exactly like you say, Chrissy, there are all these things, these tools that you can use even within something that may seem incredibly exposing. So that's kind of a control, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, in the end, it's a made thing, right? The poem is a made thing, it's language.
Yeah, it's the thing that, it's the artwork that stands between the reader and whatever the experience is or the other things were. It's a different thing. It's that for me, definitely, it's not about communicating autobiography, is it? It's about making the words have as great an effect as they can, like doing what you can with the words to try and pass something of that over.
Chrissy, you've said about your book that it's an exploration of identity in the face of loss. And it strikes me also in relation to Deborah's book that part of the identity that she's drawing upon is her grandparents' experience in Nazi Germany, which is a kind of a balance, or it's a sort of a parallel to what's going on now in the modern world that she's writing about. Did you think that's true, Deborah, that identity aspect is part of the exploration of loss?
You mean family history? I'm sorry. What?
Yeah. The family history, the kind of personal history and the public history, the way the two mesh together.
Sure. I mean, it certainly informs the way I experience violence now, having that in my family history, and agreed.
Mm.
Identities, I mean, it's sort of classic word situation in the sense of it's one small word, but what we actually use to try and define them is just this ridiculous, what any single person could mean by identity at any one point is obviously such a broad thing. Yes, sorry, I'm having a moment about the infallibility and pointlessness of language, but it's all we've got, so I'm trying to cling on to it.
So you have Italian identity as well, don't you? That's part of where you come from. Yes,
yeah, I do. I mean, I actually grew up with Italian, all of an Italian family on my mother's side, and an English, Welsh, Scottish family on my father's side. And growing up bilingual in the family home, we kind of created our own slightly bizarre hodgepodge language that used a bit of Italian in an English accent and English in an Italian accent as well. I think I have a confusing relationship with language, but one that served me really well in poetry in terms of not taking words for granted. Yeah.
Is there any sort of influence of commedia dell'arte in your trying to work with modern clowning?
I've been doing a clown history class. For anyone who wants to learn, John Davidson at the London Clown School is a wonderful history teacher. We've been looking at the history of clowning, which has, again, so many more facets than I realised. Commedia dell'arte is just one bit of it, yes. Sorry, I realise I'm going to monopolise this and talk about clowns now, so I will stop. But
carry on, Chrissy.
And improv as well, how does that fit in with your poems?
Improv is about learning to trust yourself and being willing to experience the moment and really listen to what's happening in the moment. And it's also about being able to embrace failure. Oh, I'm going to bring it back to the books. Now. This is going to. It's about building that trust, sort of with yourself, with your teammates, obviously as well, but really learning to trust the present moment instead of always worrying about what you just did or wondering what will happen. And I think it's had a huge influence on me as a person, which is inevitably sort of trickled down to, because I think a lot of the poems in this book, for example, are a lot more concise, just simply shorter in length than the ones in my first book. I think that's made a big change. But fallibility, failure, embracing failure. Rebecca, there's something in the Trampolining poem that is so wonderful about, so often I think people expect poems to be solvers of problems, like the creators of grand statements. And there's something so wonderful about that and so human about all of that. Could you say something a bit about that? The failure, no.
The crushing failure. Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experience writing the poem, I think. It started as a lyric essay and then just sort of bloomed out into a much longer piece. And I think it was an element of my life and of my childhood, which was completely absorbing. You know, I was training five days a week at one point, and spent all my weekends doing it. My parents and my poor brother being lugged all around the place for it, and it was just, absolutely everything of my life really for a while. And I guess looking back on it, I was like, this is not that interesting at all, actually. And then when I started to sit down and write it, which was, I think, sparked by the death of our family friend who'd been very tied into that life, I started to think, oh, actually, this is really interesting. And it is interesting. I mean, it was more interesting than I expected it to be. And I realised it had informed how I navigate the world and how I think about things. I think purely through that aspect of competition, and competition being such a sort of constant factor of the way I went about things, which has now made me, I think, incredibly uncompetitive and afraid of competing. But yeah, I think I'm going to try and sort of say something more interesting. I think that I was less interested in the idea of failure in terms of ceasing to be perfect at something, but more, I guess, as I was writing it, more the fact of writing and the fact of memory, and becoming, I think, increasingly uncomfortable sometimes with that I was writing about an experience I'd had that a lot of other people, including my family, had experienced at the same time as me, and how my experience potentially was very different to theirs. And it felt like a very strange writing of a shared experience from my point of view, and worrying about how I potentially was getting it wrong or misremembering, or, completely, my feelings completely distorting elements of the story. So I think it was interesting in that sense, being really aware of my failings, the failings of my memory and recall and all of those things, and how I patched everything together. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting narrative in terms of narrative, which comes back to something you've been talking about, fortunately, and both of you, this idea of narrative and breaking it up. So I can pass back to you to talk about narrative, if you'd like.
Well, I wanted to. It was just really interesting what you just said about suddenly in the Trampolining poem having to worry about getting it wrong for other people, because these were actual details. Whereas, like Deborah, when you pulled out the No Rabbits poem, the one that Rebecca started with, which I also love, is that poem seems to be saying, I might use what looks like the first person and you can trust it, but this isn't the first person. The first person isn't important. It's simply a tool I'm using. And I guess I wanted to ask you, and then afterwards, Deborah as well, to comment, like, what does the first person mean to you in your poetry?
I think I'm not really sure actually what it means to me. I think, how some people, people are able to write manifestos on the use of the first person and what it can do and what it should mean. And I really don't know actually. And I think that's probably really one of the strengths of it. It can be really anything from, a straightforward confession, if you like, to an absolute, for want of a better word, lie, I suppose. But it's something that can always be played with and undercut and distorted. And so yeah, I guess I think of it as it's just a tool, I suppose, and it can be really powerful, but it's what you want it to be for every poem, I suppose. I don't think it's a sacred thing. I think I might need to form my thoughts on the first person a bit better. Deborah, you might have something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever think of my poems as any kind of direct confession. That's not interesting to me. I don't think it would be interesting to readers coming from me, but all my books come out of obsessive material, right? Whatever that is. And I use that, whatever is like agitating me over a period of years, I use that to animate the poems and I push it through into the language, but it's always oblique or sublimated. And in the end, all I really care about is that the poem works, that there's energy in the language on the page. So that I don't know, it's not me exactly. It's always from an angle.
What about you, Chrissy?
Oh, same. But yeah, I definitely don't think of my poems as like confessional or autobiographical, even though this book is obviously drawn from personal losses. There's Rebecca, there's a great line in one of your, I think it's in the No Rabbits one, I'm going to just have that tattooed on my arm, about the grief that we suffer as has everyone else or something, and just that idea that so many people go through these things. Yeah, the first person is a tool. It's what a tool is there for us to use, and I think as long as, yeah, no, I really don't think I'm going to say anything that's going to add to what you both have just said. It's a tool to use, and it shouldn't ever be presumed to just be the outpouring of my soul.
I always think of Anne Sexton, who was like, such a classic confessional poet, and she used to say, "I lie a lot." Even she said that. And Rebecca, when I read your poem, I thought of that. So I think we're all, in the end, it's art,
Rebecca,
right?
Rebecca, you also have another long sequence in your book, the beaches sequence. And something else that your work relates to is our relationship with the natural world, isn't it? Wonder if you'd like to say something about that?
Yeah, that's so yeah, the first section is 13 poems, 13 or 14 poems, all called Beaches. That's awful, I can't remember. And they all are tied together in some ways. Mostly a common link is, like, I started writing and things kept popping up around water and sand, but not like in a kind of a beach for sunbathing kind of way, like the fact of sand and eggshells and things like this, and they kept these sort of motifs, I guess, kept appearing, and I hadn't really written much, I don't think, before about the natural world, but it's something I feel very connected to, probably increasingly as years pass, which maybe is common. Maybe that happens to everybody. You become more aware of your surroundings and more grateful for them. So yeah, I suppose they were a way of thinking about our environment and the changes that are happening to it, but also there are love poems and there are slightly weird other poems with floods, and I guess it probably a preoccupation with the climate as well, and how it is changing in a scary way, is probably underlying all of them as well.
I've got an audience question for Deborah. Deborah, fantastic reading of compelling work. Thank you. This question is from Pamela Robertson Pierce, who happens to be my wife, who's watching in another room in the house. And she's particularly interested in the cover of the book, of the Bloodaxe edition. And I know it's a photograph by a German photographer called Marina Gunst. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. And I think if you could show it up so that people could just see it. And it's ground zero as it is now, isn't it?
That's right.
It's the transportation area.
It's called the Oculus, yeah, and it's the rebuilt World Trade Center site. And I love the way this book looks. I had nothing to do with the design or choosing it. So Neil, I guess you could speak to that. It seems perfect. The US edition is not, not as vibrant in a way.
Yeah, but it was a perfect image for that book, I thought, when I came across. I mean, when I came across the image, I didn't even know that it was Ground Zero. So that was very strange.
Yeah, and the photograph has you can see all the people, all the soft targets walking through it. So yeah.
And visually, it is a kind of target.
Yes.
Visual. It's quite extraordinary. Right. Now, unusually, we don't have any more audience questions coming through. So what we could do, is there anything you'd like to ask each other about the books? Because you've all read each other's books. Anything else that we've not covered?
Rebecca, I'm only just meeting you, but I'm so fascinated. How did you make the transition from trampolining to poetry? I mean, I just can't stop wondering that.
I mean, I think there was a gap of many years between the two. Yeah, I stopped trampolining when I was about 15, I think I must have, and then just sort of resumed normal school life, which I'd never stopped doing. And then I think I always had written, though, when I was little. It had always been something that I did. And then I it's not very interesting. I went to school, and then I went to university, and I started writing, in my English, part of my English degree, and then did an MA. But yeah, they don't seem to, maybe my brain was allowed to not just be jumping up and down and anticipating with terror the next move I had to do. And I was, it was nothing. I wish it was more interesting.
I think it's fascinating. I've never met a poet who also was a trampolinist.
There might be another one somewhere.
And a poet who's a clown. Although I know of two other poets who have been to clown school, Noir Al-Sadir and Catherine Barnett.
Yeah, Noir's essay, Granter essay on the clown, is so great, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Everyone should learn some clowning. I think it's very important.
How does it connect to your writing, Chrissy? I mean, is there a way in which it's animating the writing or bringing you new momentum or something?
I think it's teaching me a lot about where the humor of a lot of clowning comes from, is from transgression in some form and doing the thing you're not supposed to do, saying the wrong thing, being in the wrong place, the wrong sized hat, the wrong sized nose, as literal as you want to be. 1 week, genuinely, the week was you have to make your own nose. That was week 3, I think. But it's that seeing what clowns have to think about when they're putting on their shows, seeing how they formulate their performances, and this idea of transgression and the minute tweaks that can make something better or worse makes me look at lines in a different way. Not in no way to say that I'm looking at lines and poems as having punchlines or joke structure or anything as literal as that, but I'm stealing a lot of those structures and a lot of that kind of energy, and it's going into my work, definitely. Wait for the next book.
I can't wait.
Well, we've got some more comments coming through now. Amy Key, I love that line in Chrissy's last poem about choosing to use your loss. You can choose how to use your loss, i.e. you have the power in how and if you can express your vulnerability.
Thank you, Amy. It is, can I I think something that I should just say is I am reticent at the moment, as you can probably tell, to really sort of talk in any way about my losses or vulnerability in the subject matter. But I do want to say that writing something that kind of pivots around miscarriage has been really important to me, because I think it's such a silent thing that societally, we're all encouraged to not tell people anyway in the early days. And so many people don't ever get to really talk about it. And one of the things that has been amazing so far is actually making connections with other women who it has happened. It's been amazing to know that even though this work is not about autobiography or confession or anything like that, there is something about trying to capture everything else that happens around those experiences that I think is really important. And I just want to say, just because I'm being reticent in talking about it doesn't mean I don't think it's important to say. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, a comment from Mia Farlane to you, Chrissy. Could you talk about how you arrived at the title of your book?
Yes, the working title for this book originally was actually Desire, because there's so many poems about wanting and needing and desiring and that sort of frustration of wanting. But then more and more, as I think I was resistant to the idea of it really pinning itself to the subject of miscarriage. I was really resistant to that at first. And it was a gradual sort of process of the manuscript evolving and me realizing what it was and how all these poems together actually spoke to each other and the statement it was all making. And Desire was clearly not the right title. And I played around with some things that were directly from the poems. The word low does appear a couple of times in the poems, but it's not taken from any one poem in a loaded way. In the end, low just seems to speak to the kind of weight that I feel is pressing down on the book, like just the emotional low state. It just felt like the right kind of, small word, but this sort of lowness. This is a terrible answer, but that's the one that
How did you decide to weave the lyrics through the song lyrics? I love that. I haven't seen that very often, if ever.
I really like using songs to set up a kind of mood for sections. I did that in my last book as well. And they're just songs that seem to have particular resonance for those groups of poems. And in fact, that reminds me, I was going to do a playlist to sort of share, because there's quite a lot of music that runs through the book. But yeah, that's what they are. And then at the end, the Fleetwood Mac Albatross one, which obviously has no lyrics, just felt like the right thing for the final section. It's very, Albatross, is such a soothing song with no words. And it just felt like having the epigraph to that section, just being a quote with nothing in it, somehow felt like the right thing to not say, to set up the end of the book.
Oh, and we've got a lot more comments come in about Rebecca's trampolining poems. A lot of people saying how much they love those. And James Goodman says, stunning readings all, sitting here blown away, thank you.
On that note.
Yeah, in fact, on that note, I've got a final one from Andrew Jackson, who says, who are everyone's favourite Muppet characters and why? It's probably one for Chrissy to start off with.
Yes, I apologise. This is clearly my fault. As a kid, I always had a toy of Ralph, the piano-playing dog. And we had dogs in the house, so I think it was just a dog and a piano was just a magical combination for me.
My answer is incredibly disappointing. The Muppets just passed me by somehow. I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. I obviously know some of the characters, but I don't feel I know them well enough to have formed an opinion that I can share on this. But I feel like a weird person for not knowing much about the Muppets. I'm really sorry.
I don't have a favorite Muppet character, but when I think of the Muppets, of course, it's Miss Piggy. That glamour.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank Chrissy Williams, Rebecca Perry, and Deborah Landau for giving such a wonderful reading tonight, and to encourage the audience to go off and buy their books. Thank you so much, all three of you. It was a wonderful evening, wonderful readings, wonderful discussion. So thank you everyone for watching, and thank you. Do applaud them at home, our wonderful three poets. Thank you.
Thank you.